Alright, so here it is, the new Intel NUC 9 Extreme, and as a predominantly ITX focused channel here, this thing has me really interested, mostly because it's just 5 liters in total volume, which would put it up against some of the smallest PC cases that I have ever reviewed, some of the smallest cases that you can currently buy on the market today. That means that in terms of portability, this thing is pretty much as good as it gets. So, you can put this thing in your backpack, no problem, if that's something that you need to do for some reason. We'll talk more about that towards the end. So there are a lot of interesting design and engineering discussions that we can talk about with the NUC 9, but ultimately what holds this back is the price. Let's talk about that. The NUC 9 Extreme is a big departure from what we're used to seeing in the NUC series. Typically, NUCs are standalone, basically pocket-sized PCs that aren't upgradable, but here we've got a modular, kind of upgradable, small form factor PC. Now, one thing the NUC 9 Extreme has going for it is the size, and we can talk all day about how you could build a comparably priced ITX PC that has way more performance, and we definitely will, but just note that there aren't that many small form factor cases out there that will easily fit in a regular sized backpack like the Intel NUC 9 will. The exterior is mostly plastic, and this does help keep the NUC 9 relatively lightweight, and it's one of the more premium looking plastic exteriors that I've seen out there. I would almost mistake this for aluminium. Both side panels are completely mesh, which is a huge thumbs up for me, and we'll take a look at the thermal performance in just a bit. So at just 4.9 liters, it is seriously small with some decent space optimization on the inside as well. If you wanted to build an ITX system at a similar volume, you'd be looking at something like the Velka 3 or 5 or the Skyreach 4 Mini, and those cases are a bit difficult to get your hands on, but I'd be lying if I said that the NUC 9 was using full desktop hardware. The main hardware spec that holds the NUC 9 back is that it's only using Intel's H series CPUs that are primarily designed for laptops. So these are 9th gen processors, and you've got the option of either an i5 9300H, an i5 9750H, or the overclockable i9 9980HK that we've got in this one. So that's catch number one. Catch number two is that the NUC 9 will only be sold as a kit, and that means that you'll still need to buy your graphics card, your storage, and your memory. And catch number three is of course the price, which really puts the nail in the coffin for the NUC 9 in my opinion, for most people that would have been interested here. So for the base model with the i5, you're looking at $1,000. For the i7, you're looking at $1,350, and for the i9 one that we've got here, remember it's just for the kit, you're looking at $1,650. So $1,650 plus a graphics card, storage, and memory. The fully equipped system that we've got here is around $2,400 US. To put that into perspective, if you equated for the memory and storage, you could build a Dan A4 SFX with an RTX 2080 Ti and a liquid-cooled Ryzen 3700X, and you'd still be a bit under. If you want to equate for that RTX 2070, then you'd still be saving a little over $700, and you have a much more powerful CPU. So pricing is a big issue here, despite the NUC 9's overall design and size being really appealing. So since this is a kit after all, the first thing that you'll need to do when you get it is open this little guy up so that you can install your storage, memory, and graphics card and get this thing up and running. So to start with, there are two small screws at the back of the case that lock that top panel in, and once those are removed, the top panel can slide backwards to unlock. This top panel is pretty neat. It has two slim 80mm fans that are positioned as exhaust, and something I thought was pretty cool here is that they're powered on by contact pins as opposed to using cables. Also, the mesh side panels can be removed just by sliding them upwards. Now you've got a view of the fairly dense and busy interior of the NUC 9. To remove or install a graphics card, you want to remove this horizontal bracket that braces the rear panel and the front panel, just two screws here at either end. Now we can see that compute element, and something to note here is that you don't actually need to remove this from the PCIe slot and enclosure to open it up and install your memory and storage. The two screws that you'll need to remove are still accessible with the compute element fully installed. But if you do want to upgrade the compute element down the road, there are quite a lot of cables that you'll need to unplug, as well as the Wi-Fi antennae that are plugged in at the top. These are all unique cables, so it's pretty much impossible to mix them up. The compute element can then be removed fairly easily once you've removed that single screw holding it in at the back and unlocked the PCIe slot. So this is without a doubt the most interesting component of the new NUC 9. This contains the mobile series CPU, 2 M.2 NVMe slots, 2 sodium memory slots, and the tiny CPU cooler. Essentially, instead of going with an ITX motherboard, which would have been slightly larger and pumped the NUC 9 up to about 6 to 7 liters, Intel decided that a smaller PCIe dockable board was the way to go here instead. What's really interesting here is that Intel are listing the compute element as a completely separate SKU, which means that you will be able to buy it separately, and also that we might see updated compute elements down the road with, updated CPUs built in. But you've really got to be banking on the fact that Intel are going to follow through with updating the compute element along with their roadmap and new CPUs, and also the fact that their new CPUs will be worth upgrading to. Graphics card support isn't so restrictive on the other hand though, and I think this was one of Intel's main motivations to make the NUC a bit larger than it has been previously. They kind of wanted to build the smallest computer that they could that could support full desktop graphics. So here we've got an RTX 2070, which is the most powerful graphics card that you can fit in the NUC 9, and you've got 8 inches of length to play with, which is exactly 203 millimeters. Now underneath both the GPU and the compute element sits a 500 watt 80 plus platinum rated flex ATX power supply from FSP. This stays super quiet under load, and that's plenty of power for what you can fit inside this build. The IO is pretty stacked here. Most noteworthy, you've got 2 Thunderbolt 3 ports and 2 gigabit LAN ports at the rear, as well as a convenient UHS 2 SD card slot over at the front. Now the 8-core 9980HK that's in the most beefed up NUC 9 kit that you can currently buy is actually overclockable, and for that reason I do want to do a second video with the NUC 9 looking at overclocking specifically, because the approach there is very different compared to overclocking a desktop CPU. At least at stock though, the 9980HK has a power limit of 107 watts that lasts 28 seconds, and then that drops off to 65 watts for longer sustained loads like rendering. The result here is that you get a short duration all-core turbo of around 4.6 to 4.7 gigahertz and a sustained all-core turbo of around 3.1 gigahertz. So if you're going to be doing longer rendering tasks, performance will suffer compared to a full desktop CPU. We'll take a deeper dive into performance benchmarks in that second video where we look at overclocking, but for now, here's a brief look at what you can expect. Rendering in Cinebench puts the 9980HK at just below the 9700K or Ryzen 5 3600, and when switching to a single thread, the NUC 9 does score pretty well. So for sure, lightly threaded workloads, the NUC 9 shouldn't be too bad at all, but I can't say that the i5 and i7 will give the same results. Overall, you will be held back when it comes to longer, more multi-threaded CPU workloads when compared to a desktop ITX machine, and I guess the weird thing there is that you could build a 3900X or 3950X system for the same price as the NUC 9 that we're testing here. The question is though, for gaming, how much does that mobile CPU bottleneck the performance of something like an RTX 2070 compared to a desktop CPU like the 9900K. So here we have a desktop 9900K CPU paired with an RTX 2070 compared to the NUC 9 with the 9980HK. Higher frame rate titles are going to depend a lot more on the CPU, as we can see by the 14% performance deficit in Overwatch and 16% deficit in Rainbow Six. If you're playing more single player oriented titles around the 60 to 100 FPS mark, the mobile CPU won't be bottlenecking you too much at all. Again though, the odd thing here is that the 9900K desktop system will be quite a bit cheaper to build, or you'd also have a bit of spare cash to upgrade the GPU instead if you want to do that. Now for thermals, the NUC 9 doesn't do too bad. In Blender, the CPU settles down to around 75 degrees C. Remember though, this is with the long duration power limit of 65 watts and 3.1 gigahertz. You can see that with the short burst power limit of 107 watts at the beginning, we do get thermals that peak at around 82 C pretty quickly. Now noise levels aren't too bad with that longer duration load, seeing as the CPU isn't getting too warm, but for gaming loads, the NUC 9 can be quite loud. Now, although I will be doing a second video looking at overclocking because I am personally really interested in seeing what we can get out of that mobile processor, My mind is pretty much made up about the NUC 9, and it just comes down to the price. It's much too expensive. This build here, like I said, is $2,400 US, which you can build a 2080 Ti ITX system for that money if you want. On the flip side, if you want to go for the base model, which is $1,000 for the kit, once you spec that up with something like an RTX 2060, I guess, you'd still land at around $1,500 US, which is pretty pricey. The other thing is, I don't really know what the market size looks like for people who need a portable PC. At the end of the day, you still need a monitor, keyboard, and mouse. And yes, you can buy an RTX 2070 gaming laptop for a little bit less than what we have here. So although the NUC 9 can easily fit in a regular sized backpack, I mean, it just slides in and you've got plenty of room to spare as well, I just struggle to see where that is useful and where you wouldn't just be better off with something like a gaming laptop where the horsepower wouldn't be too different. At the end of the day, you are using a laptop CPU in here. And if you are someone who does need this kind of really portable gaming system, I'd love to know why down below. Personally, I do see the NUC 9 being used by businesses and companies, maybe those that are involved in design, rendering, or even gaming, so like gaming cafes, where you do need full desktop graphics performance for your employees or customers, but also in a very space optimized and easy solution. For example, it's a lot easier to get 20 of these up and running compared to 20 custom ITX builds. But for desktop gaming, you really can build a much better ITX gaming system yourself, either save a ton of cash or build a better spec machine. And then when it comes to gaming on the go, I mean, you are just better off with a gaming laptop in my opinion. Stay tuned for part 2, where we will be diving quite a bit into the overclocking and seeing if we can milk a bit more performance out of this NUC 9. As always, a huge thanks for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.